This is just a little, I guess, tutorial talking about some kind of best practices as far as UV unwrapping. One of the things you really want to be uh, that you really want to do when it comes to UV unwrapping is you want to make sure you keep your seams out of sight. So here you see I have this bottle that I've modeled. Um, Here you have you normally put this sort of stuff on just to make sure nothing's stretching, everything's kind of more or less going according. So things like this label, right? So first of all, as you can see, set up in a little lighting scene, that's why you can see all this little stuff. But as you can see, everything is straight. The lines just go straight down. There's no weird bending or curving, none of that. There's only, and you can see that there's no distortion. That's what I'm looking for. There's no distortion. And so everything kind of lines up so good. So if I was going to put text on it, right? So if I was going to put text on this, it would, there wouldn't be a weird cut down the middle. Like if this was the front and I was trying to write like Sprite or Coca-Cola or whatever on front of this bottle, it would be very hard because, as you can see here, this is corner one, this is corner two. To get, I have to take the logo, kind of split it here. So it just wouldn't work well, So if I have the front here, which is more or less kind of in this region, I can take whatever logo I'm trying to apply to it, put it on that part, and bada bing, bada boom, it just lines up perfectly. And it's as you can see, it's perfectly straight. It mirrors the aspect ratio, the height to width is accurate to how the actual label is modeled, which is very important if you're putting textures and things like that on it. So, one, you want to make sure you minimize stretching, and you want to make sure also that you are placing the seams out of sight as best as you can. Sometimes the model gets a little complex. Maybe you're taking it out of ZBrush. It might be a little, tough to kind of get something working in that way. But it's as much as possible, you want to make sure that you're doing that, So that's the one thing. Another important factor is you want to make sure that it's as true to form as possible. So as much as we'd like this to be straight, kind of like how this goes, straight line, because the shape of the bottle kind of goes like this. If we were to make it straight, like if everything is to be like, a perfect rectangle, we'd be getting distortion up here, distortion down there, because that's not how the bottle is actually shaped. So you want to keep it as true to form as possible, especially if you're putting any sort of precise detail. Now for this, it doesn't matter as much because it's going to be a more of a procedural texture. Like, you're going to get like maybe some gentle bumps so that the reflections kind of hit, different. You might put a little bit of roughness into the roughness map, and that might be all procedural or just very, broad noise. So maybe it's not as essential as maybe if it was like this. This, you want it to be perfectly true to form. So if this kind of had, instead of being straight up and down, the bottle was more of a trapezoidal shape, like doot, 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 like you would want that to be reflected in the map. You wouldn't want it to be perfectly rectangular if you're putting text on it, because then you'd have like maybe the bottom would be a little too stretched inward, or the other one would be a little too, pinched to the top. Like, you want to make sure it's as accurate to, how you have it set up. Another thing I want to go over is Texel density. So, Texel is like, maybe or maybe you don't know what Texel is, but Texel is just kind of like how much space it takes up in the UV. So, the UV, this is like one UV tile, right? One UV tile. And for this model, we have it laid out just so, right? So the best way to figure this out, like I have a very basic, let me see if I can pull it up. So I have a very basic sort of, just a UV, I pulled it off of like Google or something like that. It's just numbers that go from 1 to 9 to 0, and it's just an even grid, so you can see, is there any stretching? Is everything like kind of to scale? You can use it to kind of compare. So I have two examples here, right? So there's this one. So these are two different ways you can optimize. There's many different ways, depending on whether you're doing it for games or you're doing it for VFX, depending on like the needs for the particular project. It all depends on your needs, right? That's one thing about UV. Like, there's some general best practices, but in general, also there's stuff that you do just because, I can do this. I can do it, no problem, right? So if we look at this guy here, right? So I like to kind of organize things based on what they are. So you have like, this is all, if we go in here and select this is all the cap, right? So everything, pull out a little bit. Everything up here is over here, right? You got the label over here, right? And you got the bottle itself, right? Which is over there. So maybe sometimes this is great. Like if you have like a background asset or something, like you have something that's, or something that's not necessarily Like you don't need to prioritize certain areas. Everything's gonna be like the same size texture. This is perfect. Like this is awesome. This is all that you'll need. However, say for instance, you really, really want some extra detail. Like the thing with this is everything is even, but as you can see, there's like spaces, and ideally you want to try and pack the spaces. That might might have to be a little creative with that, but with this, it's like you don't want to have this be huge and this be tiny, and this you want everything to be kind of the same size. So in that way, you kind of like you move stuff around, try to get it to fit and everything be optimized. But say for example, you wanted this label, right? Maybe this label here is taking center stage. Like you're gonna put like the logo, like Sprite or Coca-Cola, whatever, Dasani. I'm just naming brands now. But say you just wanted like some sort of a label, and you want it to be crisp, and you're going in for like a super close up shot. You want to have a very optimized layout. So what I did for this is I really just more or less edged it. I didn't put it like completely edge to edge, as you can see, because if it was super edge to edge, sometimes if you take it into ZBrush or some other texturing programs, it interprets something that's like right up against the edge, it's like being slightly over, and you get a little issues with like So I give it a little bit of a margin when I UV unwrap it. But generally you want to like if you want to optimize the real estate, you might just be like, all right, edge to edge. This way when I go in there, I can take a 4K or like an 8K map and just really utilize as much space as I can, as opposed to if it was like just this tiny bit here. So texel density has to do with how much space in if this was like an image, you'd say pixels, but when it comes to textures, it's texel, like texel, pixel, texture, pixel, kind of like that sort of thing. So if you want something to have a lot of detail, you want to maximize the texel. Again, with this, it doesn't matter as much. You don't like for these I unwrap them like individually, while with this it's all like this one here, it's all together, like everything's even. But with these I said, okay, let's say that this is one object, this is another object, this is another object, this is another object, so I kind of just did an unwrap per object, so each of them is maximized to the thing, and that can allow me, if I'm getting closer, I can get more detail on this thing. So more texel density, more space equals more detail. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, I think that covers pretty much everything. Everything I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, like definitely leave any questions down in the chat. I'll be watching and seeing if I can answer anything you might have questions with. I'll be posting these models just like as an FBX OBJ whatever file on Gumroad. So if you want to pick it up and look at it, and I would definitely highly recommend, like if you ever end up like finding good models online, whether it be from like people like find models that have sort of reputable people who made them, like people who really are good at their craft. Like sometimes people will drop their models as like open source, like open that up, look at how they lay out their UVs. So that's a lot of this. Sometimes if I'm unwrapping something somewhat complex, I might open something that someone has done in the past and be like, oh wow, they really kind of laid it out super smartly. And sometimes they're in a rush, or it's like an organic model, so the seams are a little different than what you might expect. That can be informative as well. So yeah, I would say it's very important to just kind of like make it a part of your repertoire, to look and see what other people are doing, see how they lay things up, because especially if you're starting out, it can really help you out. So yeah, anyway, hopefully this was helpful, and I'm out. Peace.